Hi, my name is John Sciacca. I am the equipment reviewer for Residential Systems Magazine, and today I am joined by Kyle Delnero, who is the Director of Training, Field Support, and Eastern U.S. Sales for Paradigm Anthem. And we are going to have a first look at a couple of the company's exciting new products that they are launching, announcing. And Kyle, just want to first off say thank you for joining me and taking the time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me again, John. It's a lot of fun doing these.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get into the specifics of the new products, which spoiler, they're subwoofers. Um, it seems that in-wall subwoofers are something that this custom installation community has been a little bit hesitant or reluctant to really embrace on their projects. And I thought I would ask you, why do you think that is? And from Paradigm's standpoint, how do you hope that these new products will hopefully attract people to use in-wall subwoofers on their installations?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, John, it's like probably you and I think every day. You can't always replace the subwoofer that's in a box in the room with something that's in the wall. It's a hard thing to replace the displacement of having that standalone cabinet, that powerful amplifier on board. So, in a lot of integrators' minds, it feels like you can't get that performance level you're looking for bass output. And I can tell you that's one of the biggest things that we focused on with the new SFC12-SW and the system is trying to replicate the in-room performance of, say, our Defiance S series products with the S10 and the S12, but give you the benefit of being able to put it in the wall so that way the aesthetics match the performance that you're looking for whenever you're designing that new system. And I feel like with the advancements in custom amplifier designs that you can, put that at the rack, just run speaker wire to that location, and the flexibility to not only have a new construction version that goes in a back box, but also one that's retrofit capable. You have that ability to add subwoofers in the room where traditionally you couldn't put them physically, or to supplement box subwoofers in the room when someone really wants the ultimate performance and they can't necessarily have box subwoofers in all the locations to get good even seat to seat pressurization and output they're looking for. So with advancements in technology, advancements in time, we've made that leap to give the performance that a lot of people were scared of in the past with an in-wall subwoofer.
Yeah, I know by the numbers, the center channel gets the most information, but really the subwoofer is able to raise the performance of the entire system. I mean, I feel like a great sub can bring a mediocre system up, another level. And so, for installers, having that foundation is such an important thing.
You nailed it. So bass is the foundation of sound, and the harmonics above bass response in the system will just get better and better. And specifically on multi-channel content, yes, you always want to have that LFE subwoofer in the room, but it's even extremely important in custom installation when you're looking at distributed audio, especially nowadays with big open floor plans, a lot of air volume to fill in a lot of the rooms we're placing in ceiling speakers and wall speakers. We need to supplement that with bass response. I mean, I can tell you personally down here in Florida where I live, I have a big open floor plan for my kitchen, my dining room, my living room, all the way to the front door. So that air volume has to be considered to get the best performance level. And adding an in-wall subwoofer discreetly in the room for distributed music sounds incredible because it gives you the bass response you're looking for. And the system is straining less to produce the output levels that I want to listen to.
Yeah. When you touched on it, it's like obviously the main benefit of the in-wall sub is that it doesn't take up any footprint in the room, which usually translates to having a higher spousal acceptance factor. And
Yes.
that also kind of leads to letting you have subwoofers in locations that maybe you couldn't have put otherwise, or being able to utilize more subs, which seems to be a real trend in the home theater market.
Definitely. So I'll give you a great example. It's not only that you can discreetly place it in the room or find a place for a subwoofer where maybe it couldn't physically fit, but here in my house, I don't have a power outlet nearby and it's exterior block
Hmm.
wall. So it would be extremely hard to relocate power to that location where I would want that box subwoofer. And I have the ability to just drop speaker wire there. Now, in my case, I have a path to be able to get to a wall where I can install the SFC12-SW, but sending in an electrician to try to figure out how to get power to that location would be significantly harder. So there's also flexibility there on the retrofit options that allows you to add it later. Because you and I know a lot of times people get their new system, They maybe start with a 5.1, but then they want to add better bass, they want to add more bass, and most importantly, even seat to seat pressurization, which is what home theater is really going towards now with things like waveforming, and electronics are adding multiple subwoofers in the room to compensate for a waveforming not being on your electronics to get better even seat to seat pressurization. And in my house here is a perfect example. I can have two box subwoofers, both aesthetically and then also from a functional standpoint, because I don't have the outlets nearby where I would want to put the additional two subs. But with the SVX1202 and two SFC12-SWs and the retrofit versions, I can go all the way up to four subwoofers in the room to try to cancel out those room modes.
Yeah. Well, and I know for like years, Harman's research said that four subs was, to the ideal for getting bass. But, I feel like for me being a custom installer, trying to convince, them that I'm going to put one big box or even two, let alone four, that always felt like an uphill battle. And now, like you said, with waveforming, I mean, it's not uncommon to find 12 subwoofers in a space. So, unless you've got this wonderful dedicated space where you can do baffle walls and all these things, you can get the bass performance without taking up an inch of space inside of the room. So, I mean, it seems like a really great solution.
Definitely. And it blends in. You can paint the grills. You can
Yeah.
make sure that it fits the aesthetics of the room that you're after, and you get the performance that you really want.
Yeah. So I know that subwoofers have always been important to Paradigm as a company, and that these aren't actually the company's first venture into an in-wall subcategory. You guys had the RVC12SQ in the past, but that design was getting a little bit long in the tooth. They've been around for a while. So talk about like how bass has been important to Paradigm in general, and also how do these two new models really take what the RVC did well and improve on it?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is what you touched on. Paradigm loves bass. So if you take a look over our 40-year plus history, the original co-founder of Paradigm reacquired the company under family ownership in 2019. And since then, we've replaced almost all of our subwoofers, both in the box and in the wall. So when you take a look at his love and passion for bass response over the years, with legendary models that had servo circuits on board, we were one of the first subwoofer companies to really take advantage of room correction with Anthem Room Correction, or back then it was called Perfect Bass Kit. So there's a lot in Paradigm's history that has really shown how to get better bass performance, how to get more bass performance into the room. And we took the RVC12SQ, which when it launched, as you said, a little bit long in the tooth these days, but it was class-leading technology. It was class-leading performance with its design. And we listened to our dealers. I think that's the biggest thing that we do here is we said, how can we make the RVC12SQ better? So we took a look not only from a performance objective standpoint, but also the install side. You're a custom integrator yourself. You know how important that is to make sure that we have all of those check boxes to make sure it's easy to plan out the system, easy to have pre-construction products for that system, and then eventually install it and do the final calibration. So we looked at all of those components and the visual aesthetics of the RVC12SQ as the necessary upgrades. So we've upgraded the performance with new driver technologies that we used in our XR series subs, which are our high performance single front firing 11-inch and 13-inch subs. It utilizes the same Carbon X material that we use there. That was also used in the Founder series, which in 2021 launched as the Founder series range with new technologies, new performance objectives, and it was the first box speaker project since the original co-founder of Paradigm reacquired the company in 2019. So it's all going back through that story of better performance, better technology, better installation methods. And then kind of to cap it all off, we know that we're leaning towards design focus too. So when you talk to our dealers out in the field, they wanted something that was aesthetically pleasing. And the RVC12SQ had a thicker trim, a thicker bezel. So this is a bezel-less grill design, just like our CI Home, CI Pro, CI Elite models. So it blends into the environment very nicely.
Speaking of design, I do love that, like your other products, that it's engineered, designed, and built in Canada, which is great. It's not going overseas. And I'm also wondering, because it's a Canadian-based product, does that help offset some of the tariff concerns?
Well, that is one of the beautiful parts of our company. Knock on wood, of course, because we
As we
we,
speak
we
here
don't make the
today.
tariff we don't
Yeah.
make the tariff laws. But one big benefit for Paradigm, as well as Anthem, on our amplifier models that are built in Canada, they weren't impacted by tariffs. And actually, the SVX1202, the amplifier of choice to drive two of these subwoofers out in the field, we were actually able to reduce the retail cost and dealer cost even after the tariffs went into place on other products that were built outside of Canada. So it's a good example of when we have the ability to do that, because that product was originally designed during COVID when pricing was more for parts, we actually reduced its retail and dealer cost after it normalized again. And that was while most companies were increasing their prices, in some cases multiple times, to compensate for the tariffs that were applied. So that is a huge part of our brand. About 70% of our speaker models are built right there in Canada, in Mississauga, about 30 minutes outside of Toronto, including the SFC12-SW, the SFC12 system, as well as the SVX1202 to drive two of them.
Yeah. So I'm gonna pick one of them up here. This happens to be the system, and while the products look and feel very similarly, they're actually designed for two different kind of installation types. This is the system, which is meant for new construction, and then the 12SW is meant for retrofit applications. So what can you kind of give as a overview of the subwoofers, how they're similar, how they're different, and the benefit, the SFC, it's a seismic force canceling, the benefit of that design?
Yeah, the big benefit of that design applies to both models because we have the force canceling design of the racetrack style drivers. So that helps to eliminate wall vibrations, that helps to eliminate and dissipate
See that right
energy
here.
within
Yeah.
the wall cavity. And that's a design that you find on both models. The woofer assembly we have there, John, is almost identical with the exception of the way that it mounts. So the SFC12SW is the retrofit option. That's what I would use here at home. You
Yep.
just cut
And
it
you can
into the
see what I
drywall.
what I love is like really like solid dog ears. Like this guy's going to screw in and he's not going to come off. You
Well,
can kind of see
and
the,
you
the
pointed out
bezel-less grill that
something
you were talking about as well earlier.
Yeah, and you point out something really unique near the dog ears. So if you take a look, the cutout shape is basically a diamond. So that's very beneficial because then the dog ear has a lot more wall
Yeah.
surface to swing out and actually connect to and
You're
secure it
jumping
to the
ahead on me,
wall.
Kyle. Yes, exactly. I was gonna. That's one of the first things I noticed is it's a non-traditional. If you look, the cutout. Usually, it's what I like to call a BAS, a big ass square, and this is clearly, like you said, it's a different shape. So again, discuss that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so if you hold it up again, you'll notice that the baffle actually gives you the ability to have a lot more surface area where the dog ear will swing out. So that way it can securely place it into the drywall when you're using the retrofit option. So you have a lot more surface area to be able to connect to. The other big benefit of that, of course, is the fact that it has that diamond-like shape. And I actually ran into this, John. I think we talked about this when we were planning this call. We designed our new factory experience center. And of course, we want to get a lot of dealers up there to experience it. But during the pre-planning phase, we had to build out that wall because it wasn't being utilized for anything load bearing before we designed this new theater space and this new classroom space. So after I'd already done the pre-wire, after I'd already placed the subwoofer physically in my mind where it would go in the room, when we got up there after the construction crews had come in, they had to put a support column there, a metal stud. And the beautiful part is because of that cutout shape, I was still able to place it where I wanted to because I could shift it all the way up against the side of that stud and still have the ability to swing out those dog ears and create a nice grip to the actual drywall. So it's unlike really any other subwoofer, especially in this category of performance subwoofers, where it has a ton of flexibility when it comes to placement on the retrofit option. And then, of course, moving into the system version, we can help isolate the bass response in the room with almost a 6-foot tall aluminum enclosure that can be mounted from the actual stud cavity. So that way it's floating in space. It's decoupled from the wall, giving you better performance, even further isolating it in your wall cavity on top of the fact that we have that force canceling design, which is where it gets its name, the seismic force canceling 12-SW or SYS.
Yeah. And like you said, the SYS implies that it's part of a system, and it does require that extruded aluminum back box. And when I first saw the image of what that back box looked like, and we'll drop that in so people can see it, my first thought was of JL Audio's kind of Fathom in-wall system design, which, if you know anything about home theater subwoofers, that's like about the highest praise that you can give to something. But I will say personally, I know that the JL's version, it required a little bit of trickiness on the installation. So, what can you talk about the installation process of that back box? No one's done that before. And like specifically, how does that improve or affect the performance over the non-system version?
So it isolates it in the wall, is the biggest thing. It's decoupling it from the wall. It's isolating the woofer enclosure inside of that large aluminum back box. So it's also isolating the airspace. So, everything's going to improve clarity, dynamics, detail, because we have a fully isolated box. It's almost like having a subwoofer in the box in the room at that point. It's a lot more similar to that than the retrofit option. Now, you mentioned JL Audio. Yes, of course, JL Audio is extremely well known for their Fathom end walls. One of the big benefits here is we have that retrofit option. Now, you and I both know we're custom integrators. I can retrofit anything. I could cut out the wall surface required to put in the back box, but the ability to add it easily into a system is also a big part of why we wanted to have both options. The performance level is going to be very similar. Now, giving you the further isolation inside of the system enclosure, that's going to give you even better performance. So it's that next little caveat of performance up when you have the ability to do it either new construction, or if you're doing like a retro remodel, we would recommend utilizing the system. Now, I can also say this from an installation standpoint. It is very easy. I've installed 6 of them now at our factory. We have 6 of them in our experienced theater. We are utilizing them so we can get even seat-to-seat pressurization throughout the entire space in a much larger theater application, and supplementing the big 4 box subwoofers we have in the room. So we went full tilt there. We wanted to go to 11 when it came to base pressurization, even bass in that space. And one of the unique things that we're seeing now in the world of home theater is not just how many subwoofers you have in the space, but also height of subwoofers in the space. Having a level closer to the ground level, and then having a level up the wall, or even, mid wall, so you can create more even pressurization throughout the entire area from an air volume standpoint. So at our factory, another big benefit of that SYS system back box is you can actually relocate the hook, and that gives you the ability to either hang the back box between the stud cavity, decoupling it so that way the woofer's closer to the floor level, or you can actually take the hook, put it on the bottom of the box, and you can invert it. So if you are using multiple layers of base in the room, you have the ability to easily do so, with binding post also on the top and the bottom for ease of installation and the pre-wire.
Yeah. And, you mentioned we always often pride ourselves on we can retrofit anything, but a lot of people don't want you to cut a gigantic hole in the wall and have drywall repair and painting. And so it's great to have both solutions, for the guy who's like, hey, look, I'm building this from the studs up. Great. Or it's like, hey, look, I just want to improve what I've got. So, it's more, tools in the toolkit.
And I'll tell you, there's also situations where you just flat out can't add that big, large new construction back box in a retro remodel. So I think about one of my dealers down here in Florida, wanted better base in his kitchen area. And he only had a small quarter wall near where his kind of bar area was that he could work with. And because of the house's design, there was a break in the wall that he would have had to do extensive work on if he wanted to add the big back box. But he was able to tuck that SFC12-SW into the wall cavity further towards the ceiling, and it added significant bass response for his distributed audio system without virtually any retro repair work.
Yeah. Now, if you saw me picking these things up, one of the first things I really was impressed by was the product weight. These guys are like 16 pounds each. They really feel substantial. Some of the in-wall products have not felt as substantial. And part of the weight comes from, it's more than a half a pound of super neodymium magnets in each motor structure, which is also super impressive. And again, I don't know if I could.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
But again, even little details like the binding posts, it'll take a really large gauge wire. So it's like just
Yeah.
the little touches that shows, to me, it's like, hey, these guys really thought this thing through. And that's what I love when I see a product, is that it looks like it was actually installed. Somebody thought about what they did.
Even down to the smallest things, right? Like you already pointed out the binding post, but also looking at our ability to make sure that the grill stands off of the front baffle correctly with the system. So we have pucks so that we can get the proper thickness to make sure it
Yeah.
lines up well with the wall surface and blends in nicely. So it's all of those little things. And that's one huge thing about this company that I love. It's not just us putting our name on a product. We are researching, engineering, developing, manufacturing, and most importantly, listening and testing. I mean, I was at the factory during the life cycle process where this went from the drawing board all the way through to the finished product. We're cutting it into the wall. We're using multiple different types of wall surfaces, multiple different rooms, different areas to make sure that it performs in all these applications that you could possibly think to put them in. And it's Paradigm employees, it's Paradigm engineers, it's me there at the factory listening to it for the first time and saying this checks the boxes to give our dealers the performance, the installation ease that they want, and give the customer the experience that they want.
Yeah. And you mentioned it earlier. I mean, it, like every in-wall stub that I'm aware of, it's passive. So it just requires speaker wire. So 12-2, 14-2, whatever you're pulling on the job. But it does require amplification. And
Correct.
I know that there's a couple of different things there. Talk about what Paradigm recommends as far as a pairing of the two, and what those two different amps offer in contrast to each other.
Yes, so soon we'll have the X500 version 2. There is an X500 version 1 that we've been shipping over the past couple of years. That's a great stereo amplifier, but also can be bridged into mono for custom installation subwoofers like our DCS208 IW3 and FR3, as well as driving a single SFC12-SW or SFC12 system. So you always have that as an option for you if you're using one subwoofer. Now that has DSP presets built in. We have DSP switches on the back, gain control knob on the back of that amplifier, so it's very easy to install it and get it prepped for the SFC12 either system or retrofit model. If you're driving one subwoofer and you want to take that performance up a notch, we have the SVX1202, which is 600 watts in stereo. So of course you're thinking now I can drive two of them, which is what usually we see people using it for out in the field. But I also like to highlight the fact that it has a benefit even for a single retrofit SFC12-SW or SFC12 system, and that's Anthem room correction is on board. So even if you're not using Anthem room correction in the receiver, the processor, the stereo integrated, or the MDX series distribution amp on the front end, you have the ability to use powerful room correction with our proprietary Anthem room correction software suite and the microphone that we include with the SVX1202 to calibrate the most critical low frequency performance product in that system in your subwoofer. So you can use it for one model, or if you are utilizing dual subwoofers in the room, you can use an SVX1202 to power two of the SFC12SWs or SFC12 systems.
Well, and certainly, I mean, it also enables you to plan for growth. If you had the
Exactly.
1202 in there, it's a lot easier to tell somebody, look, you just need to add a woofer, we're good to go. It's like, well, now we're adding another this, and then we're back in the rack. So I always say, put the better one in, and plan for the future.
Well, and it's something that I used to do when I was in your shoes out in the field when I would walk a project with a customer. Adding a pre-wire zone is very easy for me to do in that phase of construction. So if you ever think you want to add a second subwoofer in the room, let's go ahead and do it.
Yeah, pull
That
the
way it's
drop.
at the rack location, and all we need to do is add in that SFC12SW retrofit sub, and now we've improved the performance. You already have the amplifier with the SVX1202, so it's a win-win for everybody involved.
Yeah. Now, kind of or veering off for a second, if somebody had a system with Odyssey, Dirac, Arc, what have you, and they also had the 1202 with Arc in there. Best practices: do I calibrate the subwoofer with its own DSP first, and then layer on the other room correction on top of that, or just start with the processor? Like, let's say I had an Anthem processor and this Anthem, Paradigm sub. Should I do the sub first and then redo the entire room? What's the best practice on that?
So our best practice, the way that we teach it, is if you have a powered woofer section in your speaker, like the Founder 120H or the Persona 9H, where the active bass driver section has Anthem room correction on board, you would start there at the speaker level first, running room correction on that speaker, like the Founder 120H is in my house. Then you would move to either powered subwoofers with Anthem room correction or the SVX1202 and a custom installation subwoofer amp from us to run Anthem room correction there. That way we get critical low frequency response calibrated before we even get to the electronics. So we've already started to smooth that bass response. And then the final layer would be Anthem room correction through the processor, the receiver, the preamp, or the stereo integrated amp, or even, like I said earlier, our MDX, MDX8, or MDX16, where each zone has Anthem room correction, can set the crossover, can set room correction for the subwoofer, and dial it in perfectly with those speakers in that zone. So that's the way to go.
The pre-corrected sub just giving a better look to the final processor anyhow.
That's correct. And we're also taking some of the heavy lifting off of the processor, the MDX series or the STR series on the front end. So we can utilize that processing capability that we now have access to for mid-range, high frequency response in the room. So we can correct critical areas outside of bass response.
Gotcha. And if somebody was building an all paradigm home theater solution, what would you say would be the best LCR channels to match with these new subs that we talked about?
Yeah, great question. Really anything, right? When you're using an in-wall subwoofer. But one that we commonly see, and I commonly help dealers design out in the field, are CI Pro LCRs and our CI Elite LCRs. From a performance and a price point standpoint, those are usually where you see someone blending SFC12-SWs into the system to get the ultimate performance in a custom theater application, custom installation application. So really it's going to be the CI Pro LCRs, the CI Elite LCRs, but then also another common one, John, and it's so common down here in Florida, especially when it's a track home development. The pre-wires in the ceiling. So our Elite models and our Pro models with the angled 8-inch models, the P80A and the E80A models, those are perfect to pair up with an SFC12-SW or an SFC12-SYS to give you that ultimate performance when, unfortunately, sometimes those in-ceiling speakers have to be your base layer.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Kyle, I appreciate all the time and information today. Is there anything that we didn't cover on these new subs that you want to add in at the end? We got it.
I think we covered a lot. You know, it's your performance go-to when it comes to the Paradigm lineup of subwoofers. We have great subwoofers available in the Defiance in-wall series with the DCS 208IW3 and FR3 for other applications. But when you want to get that high performance, high output, theater quality bass response and an in-wall to rival our box subwoofers in the room, it's the SFC12-SW, the seismic force canceling in-walls.
So really, I mean, to kind of put a bow on it, it's no compromise performance with a design factor that is more, easier to install in a room, and usually not going to get any feedback from anybody in the house, any negative feedback from anybody in the house.
Exactly. Upgraded performance, upgraded installation, and upgraded aesthetics from the already class-leading RVC12SQ that dealers may already be familiar with. So we've hit all of those check boxes to make sure that we give not only the dealers what they want, but the customers the performance they want and deserve.
Great. And available now?
Available now.
Available
Everything
now.
is shipping
all right.
now. So,
wherever you buy your Paradigm
ready to rock and roll.
Fantastic.
Exactly.
Well, Kyle, thank you again. I thank you for watching. For Residential Systems, I'm John Sciacca.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.